not had a paycheck since age 11. Got a scholarship to play volleyball at Georgetown University, and that's what put me on the path I'm on right now. Went to Capitol Hill from there, worked as a congressional aide, doing almost every job in the office, and down in Washington, and up here in the district. I was part of the team that passed campaign finance reform. It's reform that I believe strongly in. I was just endorsed by Eds and Citizens United in this election cycle because I don't take corporate PAC money, and I strongly believe in getting the corporate and special interest corruptive influence out of politics. And I believe we need more working and middle class values down in Washington. I speak a lot about the levers to closing our income inequality gap, those being healthcare and education. Talk a lot about, is that? Okay, thank you.
35.
I talk a lot about education, not only making public education more serious investment from cradle to career, but also making college more affordable and making more practical lanes of education like vocational trades and training more exposed to kids at a young age. So I'd be delighted to answer your questions. I'm sure you have many, and I will open it up.
But our first question will go to Pam because she has to leave early.
Oh, really?
And Nancy's going to see her.
Okay, so House Resolution 2981 is on the subject of making voting easier, and the question is, how would you vote on this resolution? And
You give me a lot of credit for knowing what 291
I'm
is,
going to
but
read the
you're going to
resolution.
tell me what it is.
Yes, it requires all candidates for congressional office to run in open primaries. It requires election day to be treated as a legal public holiday.
I love that one.
It requires each state to use a redistricting commission to draw congressional boundaries.
Independent.
And it prohibits the commission from using partisan or political considerations in developing plan.
Yes. I would vote for it. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes. I'd co-sponsor it and I would vote for it.
Follow up, would you introduce it if nobody introduces it?
It's already introduced.
Well, in the current session, but.
Oh, yeah, well, it'll get reintroduced, I'm sure, but yes.
Okay, thank
Look
you.
at it, anything to make voter turnout higher, as I am the poster child for every vote counts.
So we're gonna keep with Pam because she has to leave.
All right, and the second is a two-part question on the subject of constituent services. Town halls are important to constituents.
Yeah.
1, would you sign a contract to have 4 in your first year? And 2, do you plan to have more than 4 following in the footsteps of Elizabeth Warren and Maura Healey?
And Marty Meehan, yeah, I would love to, and we had regular town halls geographically distributed throughout the district. I think it's an unbelievable and great way to stay tethered to the concerns of all the people in the district, and I believe in town meetings. I was, as a 22-year-old staffer, I was involved with organizing them and promoting them, so we always had good turnout, and I saw just how much people value that forum. So I know that Nikki Songas has been a firm believer in town meetings, and I absolutely will carry on that tradition. It'll be more than 4 in my first year. I've got a lot to prove.
Thank you. All right, and the last is on the subject of gerrymandering. There are 2 House bills. They're a little lengthy. I'm going to read them as quickly as I can. 1102 requires states to use a 12-member independent redistricting commission appointed by a nonpartisan agency to draw congressional districts. And commissioners should represent the demographic and geographic diversity of a state. And establishes criteria including minimizing the division of any community of interest, municipality, county, or neighborhood. And the commission must hold at least 3 public hearings before and after voting on proposed maps, and final maps shall be circulated in newspapers throughout the state. And I'll read the other House bill. I know it's a lot. House Bill 713 requires states to conduct redistricting process that provides opportunities for public participation when drawing congressional maps, and mandates redistricting entities must maintain a website to display data and census data and notices for public hearings, and redistricting entities must provide opportunities for public input online and in person before and after voting on proposed maps, and ensures that final maps are circulated in newspapers throughout the state.
That is.
It's a lot.
I'm sorry, it is.
No, that's okay. The first one was an absolute yes. I mean, I think what probably gets negotiated, whether it's a 12-person commission but the spirit of that bill is absolute. I feel strongly about redistricting. Look, I think both parties have been at fault for the lines that we have in our country, and the only way to solve that is to make sure that it's in the hands of not Republican or state or Democratic state legislatures, but in the hands of an independent commission. I do like, and I hadn't heard, the bill on having so much public comment. So yeah, I typically like to read the bills and a little bit more, but you know, the spirit of both of those is having more, you know, public input is a good thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, that's the questions I have.
Lori, I look like a sweet little old grandmother, so
Nope.
don't. I've been chosen to ask questions that other people have submitted.
Terrific.
When predicting how a candidate will vote
Kind of like grass slaves in the judiciary system.
and what values they have, it's helpful to look at who they have supported in the past.
Yeah.
The American Conservative Union is a conservative lobbying organization based in Alexandria, Virginia, that rates federal and state lawmakers according to conservative principles on liberty, taxes, spending, life, privacy, health care, and education, among other things. The Democratic state representative with the highest lifetime rating from the ACU is Colleen Garrett of Gary of Draycott, and her rating is 28%. You donated, according to this question, $100 to her this cycle, just as you decided to run, and your husband has donated in the past. I don't know what your husband has to do with it, but anyway. Do your values match up closely with conservative Democrat Colleen Gary, given that you have supported her?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and one I'm happy to answer publicly, because I gave Colleen a contribution before she was in a contested primary. Her and I disagree on plenty, but I've supported her because I've known her for a long time. She's a woman, and there are some things that she does a good job representing her communities on. So I know that she just got through a contested primary, and there were a lot of those issues that, you know, sort of surfaced, and there are issues that I don't agree with as well. But I've supported Democrats where I haven't seen eye to eye on everything, you know, that they stand for, and they. But you know, it's yeah. I understand the question. I understand that there are notable differences between some of Colleen's values and some of mine, and you know, we'll let the voters of her, you know, district decide if she's best fit to represent them.
Thank you. A different question from someone else. Do you support a living wage at $15
Yes.
an hour nationally?
I do.
And Governor Baker tried to send down our National Guard to the southern border before he changed his mind. Would you like to send them down?
The National Guard to the border. No, are you talking about for, I'm sorry, I don't, just.
Instead of the walls and the
Oh,
National
I see.
Guard.
He said
No.
he would send them down, and then he took back, and so he's not sending them down, but originally he said he would send them down.
Okay, so the question is, would I send them down?
Do you support sending them down or not sending them down?
No, I do not. In fact, right now, they're delivering much needed supplies in Lawrence, and I like them right there they are.
What they're supposed to be doing. Could I? Oh, it's not done. I'm sorry.
So I'm going to,
Oh, okay.
I know what everybody's asking me.
Oh, okay.
This is like the most organized forum I've ever been involved in.
It's just not because you're. Are you all done?
No, but I'll
Keep going.
wait. Oh,
Yeah.
you want me to keep going? Okay, I'm very sorry. House Bill 3057 and this is a long question,
Okay.
requires each state to use a ranked choice voting system for congressional primaries, special elections, and runoff elections. And it restricts redistricting to every 10 years unless otherwise court-ordered or required by law.
Hmm.
It also requires states with 6 or more representatives to use multi-member districts. Requires states with 5 or fewer representatives to elect all its representatives at large. And it requires 12-member independent commissions, each appointed by a nonpartisan agency to draw congressional boundaries. It establishes redistricting criteria such as ensuring districts reflect the diversity of political opinion in the state, requires each commission to hold at least 3 public hearings before and after adopting a preliminary plan, and maintain a public website.
Sorry, it's
It
not.
authorizes the United District Court for the District of Columbia to develop congressional plans if the commissioner selection process fails, or if the commissions fail to adopt plans. Would you support that in general? And if reintroduced, would you introduce or support HB 3057?
So as someone who's worked on the Hill, I know that there's a lot in these package bills. And sometimes that's exactly our kiss of death, is we put so much into a package bill that it doesn't have passage. I'm actually more of a proponent for breaking those things apart and just having simple, fair, like, bills that people can have an up or down vote on, and you can understand how people vote on ranked choice, for example. We should just take that up, and maybe even that up alone rather than packing everything else into it, because that is where we get into trouble. It becomes too complex for voters to follow, and it also creates unnecessary hurdles in the legislative passage process. So there are parts of that bill that I can say yes. I mean, look, I am the poster child for every vote counts, and I'm probably the poster child, as the New York Times just put, for ranked choice voting. But I don't think I could answer if I'm going to vote on that particular package, because I stopped counting after 6, but I think there were 6 separate things in there.
But you supported the ranked choice
Yeah,
part? Okay. Yeah, it sounded like some of the bills you were also.
Yeah,
right. It's,
So you're good
that's
with
what
ranked
makes,
choice?
yeah, hang on.
This is the last question that someone has asked me to have, and I think you really answered this, but I'll ask it. PAC money was an issue in this 10-way race. Is reforming campaign finance laws a priority to you? How would you go about it? Will you sign a contract with the candidate? Do you plan to get big money out of politics at the federal level, and how?
So I was one of the few candidates in the primary that did not take corporate PAC money. And I am 100% committed to taking the corrective influence of money out of politics.
Could you talk louder?
I'm
having
sorry,
trouble
yes.
hearing.
So I'm one of the few candidates in this past primary that rejected corporate PAC money. In fact, one of the things we're most proud of was more than half of the money that I raised in total in this campaign was from people who lived in this district. In fact, I raised more money from inside the district from individuals who lived inside this district than all 9 of my competitors combined. I do believe that's the way campaigns should be funded, is from people supporting and having an interest who their next representative is. So I think because of that, and Citizens United endorsed my candidacy, I think I'm part of a growing cadre of candidates who are rejecting corporate PAC money, and 100% focused on making, right now I think the push is on to make it more transparent, right? The disclosures actually don't exist right now for these super PACs. Some of the laws aren't actually enforced on the coordination between super PACs and the candidates that they benefit. So we're gonna get to work on that right out of the gate.
Okay, so Ben.
Sure. So I have 3 questions. They're ranging from healthcare to attending rallies and your ties to Governor Baker. So the first question has to deal with Governor Baker.
Yeah.
Charlie Baker won the 3rd Congressional District by 10 percentage points. Elizabeth Warren lost the CD3. Ed Markey lost CD3, and Baker has come out to support your opponent, Rick Green. Now, based on those CPF reports, it has been determined that you and your husband donated approximately $3,000 to Governor Baker
Yeah.
in 2014, 2015, and 2017. That was just months before you decided to run for office. Furthermore, back in April
2015.
2017,
Oh, my husband in 2017.
Correct. back in April, you gave Governor Baker a B for a rating in terms of how he was doing
Yeah.
with his stewardship over the state. Since then, Governor Baker has endorsed Jeff Deal, who is running against our dear Elizabeth Warren,
Yeah.
has supported Donald Trump, and to be quite honest with you, Governor Baker has done a poor job in terms of stewardship over the state when it comes to the MBTA, to our public schools, and to single-payer healthcare. Do you still give Governor Baker a B rating, and do you support Jay Gonzalez, and are you willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with Jay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think there's two, well, I'll just speak to all of it,
Mhm.
because I can tell it's very much at the front of your mind. I gave Charlie Baker a contribution for $1,000 in 2015, in the non-election year.
Correct.
I gave that contribution to him because, well, one, it proves I never thought of running for office before. I never really considered myself to ever be a candidate. And
But you
because
said that you're a Democrat who supports other Democrats, yet you gave to a Republican candidate.
So let me just finish. I am a Democrat that has long supported Democrats. In fact, I've supported many, many more Democrats, I think more than any other Massachusetts Democrats in the field of candidates that I was in this primary. But I did give one contribution to one Republican in my life. I did that. It offends people, and so I want to say to the people that it offends that I'm sorry. I did it because we had more than a handful of family friends who were combating opioid epidemics or opioid addictions right in their family. He was shining a spotlight on it. He was putting in place prescription caps, which we had long believed in, and I rewarded that. If I thought that it would offend so many people or call into question my life as a Democrat or my support of Democrats, I would have thought about it a little bit more than I did at the time. I gave him a B in a debate because I agree with you. I don't agree with him on public transportation. I don't agree with his policies on public education. I don't agree with him on many things. But I do like that he's willing to work across the aisle. Now, I am a Democrat. I've been a lifelong Democrat. I support the ticket up and down in the state of Massachusetts. I support Jay Gonzalez, and I can't wait to stand shoulder to shoulder at a rally with him. I support Democrats all across this country. In fact, I'm so envious right now of the Republican Party because after Roe v. Wade, they built their party ground up, legislature to legislature, state rep to state senate, and they took the long view, which is I think what Democrats badly need to do right now. That being said, I did give him a B in a debate because if there were more Charlie Baker Republicans down in Washington, D.C., I do think that there would be more work and more things getting done. The reality is the Republicans that I'm going down, bless you, well, hopefully I get the privilege of getting elected and going down to serve with, don't reach across the aisle. In fact, they're in a defensive crouch underneath the administration of this president, so.
Are you willing to condemn Charlie Baker in his endorsement of Jeff Deal?
Yeah, I think Jeff Deal is horrible for our state and horrible for our country. Yes. I think Rick Green is too, by the way. My opponent is who I'm running against. But did I answer all your questions? Because there were 3 in there, and I felt like I hit on 2, but you asked about healthcare.
Would you
So
still give him a B?
He didn't ask it yet.
I haven't asked him
Oh,
about
these-
healthcare.
these are all follow-on.
Do you still give Charlie Baker a B for his work in the state?
Such a,
As somebody who comes from a union family,
yeah.
you know, Charlie Baker is busting the unions.
Yeah.
He's privatizing the public schools, he's privatizing the MBTA. Do you still in good conscience give him a rating?
Look, I think we can do better. I think Jay Gonzalez represents us doing better.
Okay. Second question I have is Jay Gonzalez, Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, Jamie Eldridge, Quentin Palfrey, and Tammy Govea all back single-payer healthcare. I believe healthcare is a human right.
Me too.
So you are going to go on record and say healthcare is a human right?
Yeah, I think I've said that before in debates.
Locally, regionally, and statewide, all these candidates have backed single-payer healthcare. In our Massachusetts delegation, Jim McGovern, Mike Capilano, and Catherine Clark have all sponsored, co-sponsored House Resolution 676. There are 123 Democratic co-sponsors in the House, which is 62% of all 197 Democrats. The majority of Democrats have signed, I need to put my glasses back on, onto single payer federally. This includes the districts much more conservative than ours. Jim McGovern in District 9, just like this district, and he is not afraid to sign on. Sorry, I didn't write this question, so.
His district is as conservative as ours. It mirrors ours.
Okay.
PBI.
I guess the question that the person is asking is, will you, like Jim McGovern, be a fierce advocate for speaking out and standing up for single-payer healthcare? And secondly, will you sign a pledge to sign on to single-payer healthcare legislation within your first year?
So I do support single-payer healthcare. We talked about this in the, I do think that healthcare requires bold, transformative, change, because what we have isn't working. I do think right now that it's an aspiration for our country, right? And it is. I often said on the campaign, and I'll say to you all, is that the thing that I'm looking forward to is being part of the design team that gets to be at the table, because I do have concerns, because I've been around the world and I've seen some of the pitfalls of other systems. I want to make sure we're not making too severe a trade-off on access or quality. And I also want to make sure we have a reliable funding mechanism in place. What I like to get back to, and I think this is why the Boston Globe endorsed me as a candidate, because I call myself a pragmatic progressive. There are real issues right now confronting people, working class families like the one I grew up in. It's prescription drug prices that they can't afford. It's the rising healthcare premiums. And so if we can get around a table and we can design a single payer system that will pass both chambers and get this president's signature, I am in. In the meantime, Medicaid for more. We have to do something to extend coverage. We have to make it universal again. We have to do something to use an existing program that we have to fund more services like mental health and the opioid crisis, and we've got a system in place. So I want to understand the short-term options as well as the longer term, and that's what I'm committed to do.
So in principle, you do support single-payer healthcare?
I do.
And would you sign on during this legislative session as?
So that bill that you just mentioned, the entire
Right.
mass
The,
delegation? Yes.
Correct.
I would sign
Okay.
on to that bill.
And then,
I'm surprised 62% of the House, the whole House, the Democrats. That's a big chunk.
right.
Across the whole country.
So if I may ask, why were you so apprehensive to come out in front of and support single-payer healthcare? Because it's
wasn't.
not listed on your website, and I do believe at one of the debates, one of the several debates, it was asked, and I don't think you fully endorsed it, and this is the first time I'm hearing it.
No, I feel like in every debate, I always said I am for Medicare for all, but in the meantime, while we're on that path, because I do feel like it's not tomorrow, it's years away, we have to be pragmatic in our approach to fixing the real problems that are confronting families, like the rising cost of prescription drugs and the unpredictable rise of prescription drugs and the fact that people can't afford their healthcare premiums. And right now, you know, protecting ACA, I mean, that's non-trivial. We've been protecting that since the day it passed. So when I think about the Affordable Care Act and how under attack it is, and when I think about how that would affect my own family, my father who has multiple sclerosis and who used to live in fear of his coverage being taken away because he had a pre-existing condition, I feel strongly about that not going anywhere. And I feel strongly about us making sure that we are first and foremost protecting what we have, and then if we can, you know, solving some of our problems within that framework if we're too far away from Medicare for all. I am, and maybe to my maybe to my own harm, I'm so aware of the political climate and the context that we're living in right now. And I know how hard it is to get something passed through the House and the Senate and get it signed by the President, because I've done it. Campaign finance reform was four Congresses, it was 8 years. It didn't happen overnight. It was heavily negotiated, and it only included, you know, a quarter of the things that we originally set out to do. So having that, I'm sorry, am I, oh, there she is. That's no fair, you distracted me. I lost a valuable 2 seconds there. So anyway, just to wrap that up, I am pragmatic in terms of what, I want to get stuff done. When Congress is in gridlock, it disproportionately harms working class families. And so I am very focused, laser focused, on making sure that we have our eye on the long game and we're constantly going to where our values bring us. But then we're also working with whatever we can, with whomever we can, to get things done for families that are suffering.
Did you have a third question?
Yes, there is a third question. Do you want me to skip it and go to somebody else?
Sure, yeah, because we're running over.
Yeah.
Catherine, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. My name's Catherine Loeb, and I live in Maynard.
I was just there at Maynard Fest.
Oh, yeah, Maynard Fest, that's right. So our 2 questions have to do with the environment and climate change.
Oh, good.
So mine's 3-part, and I wanted to know what are your, I guess I'd say top environmental priorities, because you might not be able to talk about all of them. Where do environmental concerns stand on your own list of what you would be confronted with in Washington? Are they number 1? Are they near the bottom? How much effort would you give them?
I know everybody gets a tied rating, so there's like 10 issues that you care about equally that are under attack, but go ahead.
Yeah, and how will you get a largely science-denying Congress and Trump administration to act on environmental issues?
What was the second question again? Just say that one more time.
Where do environmental concerns stand on your own list of
Oh,
priorities
yeah.
that you would have to work on?
So
in
it's high,
Washington?
right? I mean, I think one of the reasons why you see so many women running, a lot of moms running, is because we care about the future. We care about the future that we leave to our children. And environment is, I mean, it's a big priority for all of us, whether it's climate change and leaving the Paris Climate Accord, the fact that we are no longer committed to reducing the amount of contaminants that we're, with Obama's plan by 2035. We have a lot of work to do, and the EPA has been gutted. So I think part of the excitement around winning back the House is the ability to hold this administration accountable, the ability to bring Betsy DeVos and Wheeler into committee hearings to press them on their horrible, policies. I've talked a lot about carbon pricing. There's some initiatives in the House by Ed Markey, and it's a little complex, but I'd like to see something that is easily understood and a model that we should discuss going forward. So look, I'm at the ground level. I believe in clean. I believe in science. I believe in clean water. I believe in opening up our bike trails and our river walks and everything that we can do in our communities to make the outdoors more accessible to the people who live there. I was part of the effort to preserve the Soasco, the scenic and river, I mean, the scenic and wild rivers. And that's an important federal designation that we give to our resources back home. So, you know, it's protecting our public lands to ensuring that we're at the forefront of climate change.
Okay. Catherine's husband, Jeff?
Jeff,
Very
that's so
short.
sweet. My husband now says the same thing about himself. Lori's husband, Dave.
I didn't mean to be that sweet, but. Two short questions. Do you pledge to refuse any money from the fossil fuel industry? And would you sign a pledge to this effect, the no fossil fuel money pledge?
Yeah, so I haven't signed that pledge yet, and I'm just probably behind on pledges. The fact that I don't take corporate money, I think that's subsumed in that pledge. So I just, you know, you don't take money from anything with an ink pack. You don't take money from Exxon or Mobil. So I guess I did one better. I don't believe in corporate money.
Would you be willing to sign the pledge?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to.
Oh, sure, thanks.
Oh, look at it.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Janine,
Hi.
and I have several questions regarding your advocacy for our LGBTQ citizens. In amongst your response, if you speak to your advocacy, your plans on advocating for our LGBTQ citizens who are under attack, where you stand on question 3, ballot question 3, and finally, there's question about your support of Colleen Gary because there's concern about her saying she is a no on question 3, and you had already stated you disagree with her in some things. So if you could say whether and how, if this is one of them.
Yeah. So I do disagree with Colleen on this. I am a firm yes on 3. And look, when I was in my 20s, I worked down in Washington for some pretty impressionable years, and we were part of the ending the military ban on gays in the military. That's an eye-opening, effort to be involved in, because things that when you grow up in a progressive state like Massachusetts, you just sort of assume so many things, and it was probably the first time I was confronted with discrimination at that sort of level. So I've long been an advocate for LGBTQ. I like having many voices at the table to sort of give me I'm not going to say this right, but it's the reason why I surround myself with so many diverse voices, so that I'm constantly being a spokesperson for equality, for social justice. And I hope, one of the beautiful things about what happened in our primary was that 10 unbelievable candidates, very competitive campaign, very close campaign, recount, within less than 24 hours of those results being made official. I got to stand with all of them, all the people who I so much respected in my campaign. Juana, Alexandra, Barbara, Bopa, and I mentioned the women first because they were awesome, but so weren't the men. But I'm going to rely on them. I was with Juana last week, and she knows her issues confronting her community far better than me, but I'm going to rely on her to help me so that I'm properly representing their concerns. Same with Alexandra. I mean, she was such a fierce advocate, and she was such an unbelievable candidate that I want her. I want to be talking to her on a regular basis so that she does for me, hopefully as a member of Congress, the same thing that she did for me as a candidate. She kept setting the bar higher and higher and higher, and she made us better. And I think that's how you stay at the forefront in fighting for these issues, is that when you believe in inclusion and you believe that those voices will help guide your own policies.
Thank you.
Did you have to?
I have a question about overturning Citizens United. Have we already spoken to that?
No, that's the one we didn't want to do.
I'm sorry?
You didn't want to
Oh,
do that.
that's, we,
Would you like for me to read this?
Yes.
Okay. This is, it's okay, I got this. So last year, the We the People Massachusetts organization asked members of the Mass congressional delegation to co-sponsor HGR 48, the We the People amendment sponsored by Representative Nolan. There are several amendment proposals in Congress, but we think that 48 is the most comprehensive fix, since it deals with both corporate personhood and the false notion that money is speech. We now have 8 out of 9 Congress members signed on as co-sponsors, and we expect that
Just repeat
HGR.
that. How many?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
It says that there are 8 out of 9 Massachusetts, it looks like state level Congress, signed on as co-sponsors. And we expect HJR 48, okay, so 8 out of 9 federal level?
Yeah,
Okay.
8 out of the.
Yeah.
Neil
Yes.
hasn't signed it because they don't have people there.
Yeah, they didn't ask him, he hasn't been properly asked. But, so we want to, we expect HJR 48 will be reintroduced into Congress. So, as you understand it, and I understand, I
I do
need
understand.
to, oh, you've seen it,
Yeah,
okay.
so I will, that is the part of the Constitution that killed our bill at the Supreme Court, and yes, I will be an enthusiastic co-sponsor.
So we're gonna use Congress to talk to the Supreme Court about what they decided.
Yeah, I think we have to
That's
do
a good
whatever
deal.
we can by statute, right? I mean,
Right.
it was a stake through the heart watching all that work for our Campaign Reform Act of 2002 get overturned in the Supreme Court. So, getting scrappy and figuring out how to come at that another way is exactly what we need to be focused on. So,
I think we have 4 more questions. How much time do we have?
12 minutes.
Is that right?
She said she has to leave at 4:45.
4:45.
Okay. So Linda,
So my question is delightfully simple.
They all were. Some of them were just hard. They were simple, but
So, do you support Yes on 2, and would you be willing to sign an endorsement of Yes on 2?
Can you speak louder?
yeah.
Do you support Yes on 2, which is about overturning Citizens United? Here's my button, this is my life these days. And would you be willing to sign an endorsement of Yes on 2?
Yes. I think I might have already, but I'll do it as many
Okay, I'll
times as
follow
you'd
up
like
with
me to.
okay, we're gonna finish out the ballot questions.
Do you support,
Sorry, what was that?
what is your,
We have 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, I guess
I'm
we have
sorry.
5
Yeah,
minutes.
I say things as if with
That's
a lot
why
of
I'm
confidence that I know the
factoring, yeah.
answers, but
Oh, isn't it 4:40?
what is your stand on question 1 and why?
yeah. So I am. I believe in safe staffing ratios. I believe in anything that will ensure the quality of care and safety for our patients. And I'm compelled by the fact that I think it's 86% of nurses are for this Yes on 1. I wish this wasn't a ballot initiative. I feel as though we missed an opportunity getting at the table with the legislature because those ratios are going to they're going to have cost consequences. It took California 5 years to figure that out after they passed it, and I think Massachusetts is going to similarly have a struggle because there's 5 community hospitals in the district, the 3rd congressional district, and so I wish it didn't come to this point. But of course, I want to make sure that patients are safe, and I want to make sure that nurses are staffed appropriately.
Okay. I think we're going to go to,
So is that a yes or a no?
she's leaning yes. Is that-
Leaning yes.
Leaning yes, okay.
It's just you 2, is that right? Anybody else have questions? Yeah, right, okay, go ahead.
HB 4906.
Oh, what is it?
Amends Title 13 of the U.S. Code to prohibit questions on citizenship, immigration, or nationality on any census. I assume that means any federal census.
Yes,
Would you sign if it's reintroduced?
bet.
you bet.
I have other questions, but not assigned questions, so
Yeah.
we have time.
Well, we're going to go through the ones that were originally submitted first, and then any, I
Yeah.
think Nancy has
Yeah.
one, and then.
Yeah, you told me mine was gonna be easy.
I don't know,
So-
maybe it's not.
So here we go. Given the current news stories we've been hearing the past week and the past 2 years, in combination with your background starting a small tech business owned by women, would you strongly consider and self-advocate for joining the committees which no member of the Massachusetts delegation currently sits on now, which includes the following 8: education, the workforce, small business, science, basic technology, ethics, house intelligence, judiciary, veterans affairs, or natural resources?
So Nikki will leave some.
So we're like, what, yeah, the question is basically which,
Yeah, so the two
Committee
You're
committees.
just targeting getting somebody on those committees from the
From
delegation,
Massachusetts.
as opposed to like joining one that somebody's already on.
You bet. So the two committees I'd like to be on are education and workforce, which we don't have a member on today.
What's the other one?
Workforce.
Education and workforce.
that's the one.
That's where.
And House Armed Services Committee.
So actually, that question, so Seth's already on that.
I know.
You still would wanna be on it?
Was Corey on Veterans Affairs?
No, so Nikki Songus was
Or
on
Nikki
House Armed,
Songus, sorry.
she was on House Armed Services and Natural Resources. I'll tell you why it's an important committee. So the person who has held the seat in the 3rd Congressional District has sat on that committee for the last 25 years. It's vitally important in terms of its economic contribution, to the Commonwealth. The DoD gives $12 billion a year to the state of Massachusetts to support the defense industry, not just the defense industry, the high-tech industry, dual-use technologies, the research institutions that we have in Massachusetts, UMass Lowell, for example. It also supplies over $100 million in small business innovation grants that sort of fuel our economy and support almost 70,000 jobs. I like, all of that is very important, especially in given the legacy of the person who's had this seat. I'd also like to use that seat, which I've seen it be used both by Congresswoman Songus, as oversight of this administration.
I'm not hearing you.
I'm sorry, I also think that in addition to the economic contribution it makes to the state of Massachusetts, it's also a great committee to provide oversight of this administration on military spending.
I would like to ask a question. So a friend of mine is the dad of Mike Mullen, who you probably know
Oh,
his
yeah, I
name.
saw him today.
And he is, so did I. And he implored me to support him. And I checked him out and I thought, he is really progressive and I'm progressive.
Yeah.
And I would like you to tell me, or any progressives in this room, which is probably most, why would you be a better candidate than Mike Mullen? So I can go back to my friend and say, not this year.
Yeah. So a couple things. I mean, I grew up in a working class family. I think that does a couple things to you. I went to Lowell High. I started my freshman year with 900, classmates. I graduated with 540. And even though I went to college, I wouldn't have gone to college if I hadn't gotten a scholarship. My husband went to the Greater Lowell Vocational Technical School and pursued a very different dream than I did, but it was the right one for him. And so I do believe that one of the issues with the Democratic Party is that we haven't confronted the economic anxiety of families in our party. When you've got economic anxiety, when you can't afford your kids' education, when you can't afford your health care bills, when you can't afford your prescription drugs, it's really hard to think about anything else. And so one of the reasons why I'm excited about this election year is because it is a change election. We just had, the only reason why I'm running is because President Trump won in 2016. And the only silver lining in that election is that people are engaged, people are running, people are now turning out to vote. Like this midterm election just went from a typical sleepy midterm, like 55,000 votes, to 89,000 people voting. That's a good thing. Whenever we have a critical mass of new people going to Congress at the same time, we have an opportunity to change things. And Congress has been gridlocked. It's been frustrating. It's been frustrating for me to watch it. And I think you get that with new leadership. I think I've got experience that Mike doesn't have. I'm rooted in the district because I've lived here my whole life, and I come from a working class family. I have experience down in Washington, so I understand the legislative process, and I also understand how to run a district operation that's accessible and open to the public, that focuses on constituent services and economic development for communities, so I think I'm gonna hit the ground running. And I also have private sector experience. You know, I was the only woman executive at a high-tech company in Cambridge. I started my own company with 2 other women, focused on getting more women into leadership roles in companies across the country. I do think we need many, many more women serving right now in Washington than we have right now. I think we need many, many more women serving in boardrooms than we have right now. Because I know that better decisions are made when more women are at the table. So I think the combination of my being rooted in the district my whole life, bringing working class values to Congress, having experience to hit the ground running, and being a voice that's going to make sure that women are treated with respect and equality in the workplace as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lauren, I would just like to make a very brief comment. I was reading questions, and since this week I'm fired up as a woman, I want to apologize to you for 2 questions in which your husband's activities were asked about.
Thanks.
That is extremely sexist. It has nothing to do with your candidacy, and so I apologize for
Yeah.
reading those questions.
I second
It's
that.
nice
For
of you
reading
to
that
apologize.
portion of the
Well,
question.
thank you.
I
I know, look, I wish we agreed on more.
Did anyone else have a question? Okay, then you had a question, right?
Yes, you said that you are not taking corporate money, but, if the Democratic Party takes corporate money, and it funnels it all around the country to
Mhm.
various Democratic candidates, including yourself, how do we citizens, and how do you as a candidate, make that more transparent, et
Yeah.
cetera?
That's a great question. One, I wish the Democratic Party was giving me money. And I'll tell you why. You know, so I'll tell you just a very real concern I have. When you have a late primary, the way Massachusetts does, I just left everything I had on the field. I'm depleted. I'm hundreds of $1,000s in debt, and I've got 6 weeks to take on a Republican who has already said he's going to put $2.5 million in this race. I was down in Washington last week, and no one is thinking that Massachusetts could ever go red or swing, right? So I'm not even on their radar. I'm going it alone, you know, and so it's the reason why I make the joke. If only that they would give me money, I would have that problem. Transparency, I think, is what is what's needed. You know, that is people should know, you know, what you know, who's writing these contributions. It's not so much of an issue with the DNC and the DCCC because I believe they do have to report their contributions. I think it's more of an issue with super PACs, but I could be wrong with that. But I think they're the ones that can have the money that without disclosure. So I am a firm believer in disclosing who those contributions come from, and
And do those super PACs sometimes give money directly to the parties?
I don't believe they do. So you know
It's all independent expenditures?
yes, I think they give independent expenditures. I could be wrong on that, but I'd have to check.
Okay.
But I don't think, if you have I'll get the number wrong, but the code of the independent expenditures, they don't go to the party, they either spend on behalf of themselves or they can spend on behalf of a candidate. And, you know, I'm actually confronting that in this race, right? Mass Fiscal Alliance is one of those dark money organizations that will, you know, spend money against me.
Could one of your staff persons find out the
Yes.
answer to that and let us know?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I have one lightning round question, which I think is a yes or no. Does anyone else have any questions after that?
I do.
Yeah. Lightning round, yes or no? How would you vote on Brett Kavanaugh?
Oh my God.
Oh, is that not a lightning round? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I asked for him to withdraw before I even heard him speak. Oh, there was only one lightning round?
I think
That was a
it was-
short lightning
I
round.
don't know, we're out of questions, I think, now it's.
So what is your position on genetically modified food?
Yeah, so I think we need more regulation in genetically modified food. I will be the first one to say, this is an area where I have to learn more. I mean, as a mom, I know that I'm very concerned about how I buy food, and because of the trend toward genetically modified food. But it hasn't been an issue that I've done like a deep dive on and how to do that. But I think I've got all the same concerns that you do in terms of, you know, everything from the insecticides to the hormones to, I'm super concerned about what's going into my children's body, what's going into all of our bodies. And so I would love to understand that better so that I can have an impact there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. All I know is I have to go put on
Can you have
a fancy
some-
dress, and I don't feel like it.
Lori, there's some fruit and cookies